Welcome to EduCasts, home of EduCasters. So, enough theory. What does this principle actually look like on a Tuesday morning in a public high school with 35 kids in the room? How do we operationalize active learning without losing control? It's about high-leverage strategies that force cognitive participation. 1. Retrieval practice. Instead of starting class with a review, remember yesterday we talked about mitosis. Ask the students to take out a blank sheet of paper. Write down everything you remember about mitosis from yesterday. You have 3 minutes. This is hard. It feels bad. Students will stare at the page. But the act of digging into memory and pulling that information out strengthens the neural pathway more than rereading their notes ever could. It's active retrieval. 2. Elaboration. The why game. When a student gives an answer, the passive teacher says, correct, and moves on. The active teacher says, why, or how do you know, or what if I changed this variable? This forces elaboration. The student has to explain their mental model. They have to connect the new fact to older facts. This turns a single data point into a web of knowledge. 3. Peer instruction. Think, pair, share on steroids. Eric Mazur, a physics professor at Harvard, realized his students could solve textbook problems, but failed at conceptual questions. So, he stopped lecturing. He would throw a hard conceptual question on the screen. Students vote. Then, without revealing the answer, he says, turn to your neighbor and convince them you are right. The room explodes in noise. Students are arguing physics. They are translating the concept into their own language to persuade a peer. After 2 minutes, they vote again. Invariably, the percentage of correct answers skyrockets. They taught each other. The teacher didn't say a word. That is active learning. 4. Problem-based learning, PBL. This is the deep end of the pool. Instead of teaching the content and then assigning a problem, you assign the problem first. Design a container that can keep an ice cube from melting for 2 hours using only these materials. The students don't know about thermodynamics yet. They have to figure it out to solve the problem. They have to look up heat transfer. They have to experiment with insulation. The content isn't the goal. The content is the tool they need to use. This mimics real life. In the real world, you don't take a test on Excel and then use it. You have a data mess to clean up, and you learn Excel because you need it to survive the project. We are currently drowning in EdTech. Every district has bought thousands of Chromebooks and iPads. But are these tools promoting active learning or just digital passivity? If a student is using a tablet to watch a Khan Academy video and then click through multiple choice questions, that is just a high-tech version of a lecture and a worksheet. It is passive. However, technology can be the ultimate engine of active learning if we move from consumption to creation. Passive, watching a documentary about the Civil War. Active, editing a 3-minute video essay using archival photos and primary source letters to argue a specific point about the war. Passive, reading a blog post about web design. Active, coding a basic HTML, CSS website for a local nonprofit. The question to ask about any technology in the classroom is the student the consumer or the creator? If the software is doing the thinking, adaptive algorithms, it's a crutch. If the student is using the software to build something that didn't exist before, it's a power tool. There is a sinister pattern in American education regarding active learning. If you walk into a gifted and talented program, or an expensive private school, or an upper-level honors seminar, you see active learning. You see Socratic seminars, debates, robotics labs, and independent research projects. We trust these smart kids to handle the freedom and the cognitive load of active learning. But walk into a remedial class or a school in a critically underfunded neighborhood, and what do you see? You see drill and kill. You see rigid control. You see rote memorization and worksheets. We have decided implicitly that struggling learners aren't ready for active learning. We think they need the basics spoon-fed to them before they can do anything interesting. This is a tragedy, and it is backward. Students who struggle with traditional schooling, often those with learning differences or those learning English or those from trauma backgrounds, are often the ones who need active learning the most. They are the ones who get lost in the abstraction of a lecture. They need to get their hands on the math manipulatives. They need to act out the scene in Romeo and Juliet to understand the language. They need the concrete, visceral hook of doing. To make the abstract concept stick, by denying struggling learners access to high-quality active learning, we are denying them the very thing that could help them catch up. We are boring them into failure. We have to acknowledge the elephant in the room. Active learning is scary. It is scary for the teacher because it involves a loss of control. A lecture is safe. You know exactly what is going to be said. A discussion or a project is wild. You don't know where it's going to go. It requires the teacher to be an improviser, not just a script reader. It is scary for the student because it involves the risk of public failure. In a passive class, you can hide. You can wear a hoodie, put your head down, and disappear. In an active class, you are on the hook. You have to speak, build, or do. This means that you cannot have an active learning classroom without psychological safety. If a student is terrified that they will be mocked for a wrong answer, they will not participate. They will not take the risk. They will clam up. The teacher has to cultivate a culture where wrong is just a data point. A culture where we celebrate the interesting failure. I love that mistake, the teacher has to say, because it shows us exactly where the logic breaks down. Let's look at it. When students trust that the teacher isn't trying to trap them, but is trying to spot them, they will lift the heavy weight. The number one pushback from teachers against active learning is time. I would love to do a debate, they say, but I have to cover the whole 20th century by May for the state test. This is the tyranny of coverage. We feel immense pressure to mention everything, but we have to be honest. Mentioning is not teaching, and hearing is not learning. If you sprint through the curriculum covering a topic every day, you might check all the boxes on your lesson plan. But if the students are passive, they are retaining almost nothing. You are painting a wall with water. It looks wet for a minute, and then it's gone. Active learning takes longer. It takes time to let students struggle with a problem. It takes time to debrief a simulation. You will cover less material. That is a fact. But the trade-off is retention and transfer. It is better to cover 70% of the curriculum and have students actually master it deeply, securely, in a way they can use, than to cover 100% and have them remember nothing. We have to have the courage to make strategic cuts. We have to prioritize depth over breadth. We have to realize that the goal of school isn't to expose students to every fact in the world. It's to train their brains to handle facts. If they learn how to think historically by doing a deep dive project on the 1960s, they can apply that thinking to the 1860s later on, their own. Ultimately, the principle that learning is an active process is about power. In the old model, the teacher holds the power. The teacher holds the knowledge, the answers, and the agency. The student is a subject. In the active model, the power is transferred. The student becomes the agent. The student becomes the one who observes, hypothesizes, tests, and concludes. This transfer of power is the entire point of education. We aren't raising children to be students forever. We are raising them to be adults. We are raising them to go out into a world that doesn't have an answer key. When a student learns actively, they learn more than just the subject matter. They learn self-efficacy. They learn, I can figure this out. They learn that confusion isn't a stop sign, it's a doorway. I had a student once, a quiet kid who rarely spoke. We were doing a physics project, building trebuchets. He was struggling to get his release pin mechanism to work. He tried, failed, tweaked it, failed again. I watched him from across the room, biting my tongue, wanting to go help. I didn't. Suddenly, he let out a shout. I got it. He had figured out the angle. He looked at me, and the look on his face wasn't the look of a kid who had memorized a definition. It was the look of a kid who had conquered something. That is what we are chasing. Not the silence of compliance, but the noise of conquest. The messy, loud, frustrating, beautiful sound of a human brain rewiring itself in real time. Learning is an active process, because life is an active process. And if we want our schools to prepare kids for life, We have to get them out of their seats and into the game. We have to stop treating them like hard drives to be written to and start treating them like fires to be lit.